Welcome to the Irish Snug Podcast. All right, let's get going here. Joe Brady. Normally, I have like a little bit of a introduction for people, and I write it up. But I've known you for so long. You're a longtime friend. I've known you since.
When did you start with the band?
Yeah, so it was 1994. I came to the FDNY Bagpipe Band, and you were the instructor of the band. I remember coming to practices, and then you said to me, go get yourself a private instructor, and you led me to John Chalmers. And I went to John Chalmers, who lives upstate by where I was living at the time.
Right.
And he was a great instructor, and I stayed with him for a bit, and then I kind of stuck with the band and did my own thing there,
Yeah, Johnny's a good guy, a good instructor. I'm proud to call him one of my better pupils. I think you had talent that I didn't want to see get kind of washed away in a group session, so it was good.
It's great. You're going to come into a band like that, and they have group lessons, and that's what's available, and that's great. But having an individual instructor was really, I think that was the greatest thing. It was just better. You learn better. You learn not to make mistakes on certain. You learn from your mistakes.
You don't get away with the mistakes as easily. You get that individual attention.
Yeah.
But 1994, holy cow!
I know. So Joe Brady, legendary bagpiper. Joe's an open piper since he's probably since before he was born. An adjudicator.
17 years old. I was 17 when I entered the open.
17 when you became open?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You're an adjudicator. When the FDNY band was competing, we'd see you out on the field there. I remember seeing you, your dad there as well back in the day, but also a drum major, adjudicator as well, right?
Yes. Yep.
You're famously known for leading the New York City St. Patrick's Day Parade as the regimental pipe major of the Fight 69th for, 30-something years, right?
33 years, yeah, hard to believe. That was quite the run.
Yeah, it's a great run, and we'll get into that. We'll talk about that, but I'm just kind of giving like an overview of what I remember, like just. And another highlight is awesome is the Hunter Mountain Celtic Festival.
Yeah, enjoyed running that thing for
mass bands. The mass bands, right? You were the drum major for that.
Yeah, I also organized that with my peak skill people. We kind of conducted the whole bagpipe portion of that for a whole bunch of years. It was very sad to see that go by the wayside.
I know. Let's go back to before we even get into yourself. Let's hear about Joe Brady Sr. What was his background with bagpiping and what got him into it?
Well, first of all, it was really the sound of the instrument. His parents came over from Ireland. His father was from Armagh. His mother was from Roscommon. And they did not like the bagpipes. They did not like them. He did not learn it because he was Irish. He loved the sound of it. And I remember stories of him saying he'd have to lock himself in a room to practice, which he did. His first band, I believe, was County Cork or Armagh. I'm not sure which one at this point. But he started learning, and I guess he started when he was about 17. And at some point, he realized he was hearing some good bagpiping, and he was not playing like the good bagpiping he was hearing. And he had the opportunity to start learning from a recently immigrated senior pipe major, the Black Watch, who immigrated here in the early 60s, I believe. 61, 62. That was John McKenzie. So my father started going to lessons with John McKenzie steadily and improved and became quite a piper. John McKenzie taught quite a few good bagpipers. My father was one of them. Another one of interesting note was former Attorney General Bill Barr, who was a student of John McKenzie and then of my father's. And McKenzie was became the instructor for the Gildry Pipe Band, of which my father was pipe major. And my father did quite a good job competing solo-wise and with the band, and was totally immersed in it. And his parents finally came around to appreciate the music itself and what it could do for him and his family.
Do you think that was their dislike of it had anything to do with just the times? Like there was that time where a lot of the Irish they were setting aside the language. Yeah. They were setting aside the music. They were setting aside.
It's a different culture. Yeah, my recollection really is that they were not exposed to it enough. It wasn't music that interested them. They had other likes when it came to music. Bagpipes was not something they were exposed to. So I don't, of course, they're all gone now, but I don't recall anything until later on in my career, any kind of political issues.
Do you remember your grandparents?
Yes, very, very fondly. Yes, my grandmother passed. I was married in '77. She passed in 1982, 81 actually. And my grandfather, years later, he lived to be 93. So I do recall them fondly. And visiting Ireland with them was a treat. When my first trip to Ireland was 17, and they made sure they were there with me. So they were great, great people.
What did that feel like? What was that like, that trip?
Oh, first of all, I'm 17 years old. I was actually drumming with the New York City Transit Police Pipe Band. It was when they went over. That's who we went with. My father and I went. And so his parents went. Now, you got to realize I'm 17. So at that time, my father was, he's 25 years old. I am. So he's like 42. So he's ready to party with these guys besides playing. I mean, they had a great time. And he's dragging along a 17-year-old kid, which I'm awful glad he did. And I had a great time with my grandparents. They spoiled the hell out of me. And I think there had to be more than one time. But I remember being out with the band. And, after playing some events, they had a special room in the hotel to party, which we did. I did as best I could at sneaking it at 17. But we'd be going over to go back to the room. And who'd be coming out of the elevators, getting ready to go to church for a 6 o'clock mass was my grandparents. And they're looking at my father and saying, "Oh, so this is the way you're bringing this kid up,
Uh-huh.
But we had a tremendous laugh about it afterwards. We're going to bed and they're going out to mass.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I had the conversation with Eric Stein was on the podcast, and we talked about how after like whatever competition or whatever, the real party and the great time is in the hotel afterwards, right? In the hanging out in the pub afterwards. That's when all the stories come out.
Oh yeah, after you do all your work, and especially if all the work you put into it, you're satisfied with your performance. Sure, it's time to celebrate.
Right. So, you remember anything else from any of your trips to Ireland with your grandparents?
Well, that trip was kind of special because the band was playing at the Kilkenny Festival, which is a big contest there, and I had just started drum majoring like the year before. And was it
at Kilkenny Castle? Is that where they had it, or
no? It was in Kilkenny, but I don't recall being at the castle. It was big fairgrounds, someplace there. And it was a big festival, and kind of as a goof, the band encouraged me to join the drum major contest, which I did. And I know the stories afterwards was that the organizer committee they said, "Hey, we got this kid from New York, an American here amongst, I think there was about 18 or 20 drum majors, and they wanted to get a consolation plaque or a prize or something to give me, but it was a Sunday. And every place was closed, so I did them a favor. I won the contest, so the plaque I got was the first place trophy. So that was really my first big prize in the drum major contest was in Ireland.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
That Kilkenny is such a great town.
Yeah,
I love Kilkenny. Great.
Well, my best night there. Although my father was never a problem with me. I mean, looking back, he treated me pretty well. But my best night there was with the night he was not feeling well. He stayed back at the hotel and I was out on my own. It was good.
Yeah, yeah. So my dad, I'm still hearing stories that I've heard 100 times over and over and over again, and I love hearing them. I'll never say, "Dad, I already heard that one again." I love hearing the stories because there's going to come a day where I don't hear those stories anymore. Is there any good stories that your dad always told you that you wish you could hear one more time?
Tim, I wouldn't know where to start with that. For anybody that knew my father, he was considered quite a character. I often say my father never grew up. I mean, a lot of times he's a pain in the neck to me, but then I realized later on in life that was him. He would take over a room. There were a ton of stories. I mean, certainly in the bagpipe world, we traveled together a lot, and he was quite a character. And like you say, you enjoy hearing them. Even as I go to the festivals and the contests now, there's always somebody coming up. Relating some story about my father or from my father. It was everything from his business cards to doing this and doing that and wearing wigs and the mass bands, which would drive me nuts. He was quite the character. I do know at one time the president of the Pipe Band Association, McLean McLeod, referred to him as one of the most colorful characters in the association. So I wouldn't know where to start story-wise, really. But as we go on, if something pops up, I'll share it with you.
Okay, great. How about mom? Was her Irish roots pretty strong and while you were growing up?
Not nearly as my father. My mother grew up in the Bronx. Her parents are both born here. Then she had grandparents in Ireland and Scotland. She was the opposite of my father. She was very quiet, always supporting him, but she was always in the background, quiet. You know, she went to a lot of contests, and later on in life, she only went when she felt like it. My father would still go as I was playing and go competing. He would go with me, and she had her choice to either come along or stay behind. She had a couple of favorite ones, but she was the quiet one in that couple. My father more than made up for it.
Okay. Did she keep him grounded?
She probably tried to at times, but they were a great match for each other. They really were.
Yeah. I feel like my wife keeps me grounded a bit.
But I'm glad I could say the same thing. I'm telling you, I'm kind of glad she went out shopping as we're doing this. But and looking back on it, anytime my wife did keep me grounded, I'd look back on it and say, it was probably the right thing to do. Maybe at the moment, it's not, you're not too excited about it. But in retrospect, she saved me from myself a couple of times. So
what got you into, I mean, obviously your dad played the bagpipes, but was there any spark? How old were you? And then what was your initial?
Well, in a nutshell, my father started teaching me when I was 7 years old. We lived in Parkchester, and I guess he was kind of pushing it on me, almost forcing it on me. And I didn't want to learn. And I actually, the practice chair and the piece you'll learn on the fingering, I actually threw it out the window of our 6th floor apartment in Parkchester. And that was that. But when asked what I wanted for my 9th birthday, I wanted my channel back for some reason, and that's what I got for my 9th birthday. And the old saying is that my father learned a lot between the ages of when I was 7 and 9, and he took a totally different approach. And it's funny to mention that because we were just talking about the other night. I was at the Iona College Pipe Band 60th anniversary reunion, which was just a tremendous function. And I'm one guy that was there 60 years ago because I was 10 years old. My father would bring me to Iona College. He was instrumental in starting that band and instructing the band. So then I was exposed to some of these college guys, and it seemed to be a lot of fun for 10, 11, 12-year-old. And I was learning, and I was doing okay and playing with the different bands. I played with Iona. I played with the Thistle Gildry Band, the Yonkers Military Band, and kind of enjoying it. And I gotta say this, I was taught well enough that going into high school, I was able to keep on playing. I wasn't as distracted as so many people who maybe just started in high school would be, and it carried me through. And then, because of my father's insight, he was one that was instrumental in getting Iona College to offer scholarships for pipers and drummers, and I was a recipient of that. So I went to Iona, and I could not have done it without the scholarship, and that just offered me so many opportunities to play and to travel and to learn more and more.
Yeah, I know a handful of guys that got scholarships to go to Iona. Brian Marr.
Yeah,
right?
Sure. He was there Saturday night too. Great guy.
Oh,
yeah. I could share this with you. One of the things, I was very happy and lucky to have my father, who was a good piper, teach me. But I was like 16 going on 17, and he encouraged me to enjoy the Worcester Kiltie Pipe Band out of Worcester, Massachusetts, because the Worcester Pipe Band at that time in the early 70s was typically the prize winners throughout North America. It was the best pipe band in North America, and it was being run by Pipe Major James Kerr from Shotts in Scotland. And my father thought just spending a year with the Worcester Band would help my piping immensely. So I don't know how it happened, but in 1973 I joined the Worcester Pipe Band, and I was the only Irish Catholic in the band. The rest were Scots Protestants, but they didn't. Bagpiping was really the nationality, and they welcomed me with open arms. So much so that I actually stayed there. I played there for 17 years. I learned a hell of a lot. It was Pipe Major James Kerr who really got me on the right track. He didn't let me get away with anything. It started off, the relationship was very tough. He was like a sergeant major, but he knew his stuff. He knew how to make pipes. He knew how to teach. He knew how to play. He also knew how to lead a pipe band. But the way I was treated, I wound up staying there 17 years.
Sounds like a lot of driving.
Well, you know what? It is a lot of driving. But so what I did while I was at Iona, I went ahead and got my pilot's license. And I actually flew from White Plains to Worcester. Luckily, James Kerr lived a mile or so from the airport. So typically on a Friday, and even when I was working, I'd finish work at 5 o'clock. I'd go to White Plains Airport. I'd airborne at 5:30, land at 6:30. We'd have a cold beer. They'd go to band practice, and I'd fly back in the morning. So that's how I got around the driving club.
I never knew that.
I don't think I couldn't have driven as much as necessary to practice up there. And then in later years, I became one of the veterans in the band. Our relationship between James and his wife Ruby, my wife Anna, and myself became more like brothers and sisters. After I left the band, he continued to help me, and we traveled together and judge it. But I didn't go as practice all that regularly near the end. I knew how to do what needed to be done, and I would fly up on a Sunday for a good session and then fly back. And that's how I got around the traffic stuff, And then James stepped down, and I left the band in 1989 is when I started the band that was sponsored by the FBI, and James was helpful in making the chanters we used and, helped me get the band started off right as a pipe major. He was great as a solo piper, but then I also learned a lot about being a pipe major from him.
So you were one of the guys that started the FBI band?
I was the one that started with my father.
You were the one that started, okay.
Yes, yeah. Now, the FBI band was not FBI agents. Here and around the New York City area, you expect the FDNY band will be FDNY guys. It's same thing with the NYPD. There, the FBI Emerald Society / FBI Marine Corps Association sponsored a band to represent them. And to tell you the truth, there was only a couple of FBI people in the band. My sister being one of them, as a matter of fact. She worked surveillance for the FBI. She was a piper in the band. Otherwise, it was all civilians. And you knew some of them. There was a couple of guys from the fire department, some guys from the police department.
We had a guy in the band for a short time. Was it Richie Finer?
Richie Finer. He was in the band. Yep.
Yeah. Quick side note on Richie Finer. He's the first person that took me to Glacken's pub. You remember Glacken's on 149th Street in the Bronx?
Vaguely, yes.
Yeah. That they just closed, actually. But I digress. Go ahead.
No, Richie was a big help to me in the band. Between Richie Finer and John Rincieri, who was a Yonkers cop, those guys watched over the kids I had in the band. So all I had to do was worry about teaching bagpipes, make sure the band went well. They took care of the discipline. By the way, I was with Richie Finer in Florida just around this time last year. We had to go to Florida. I was in Cancun. I had to stop in Florida for a funeral for my wife's uncle, who I wanted to play for. And Richie was kind enough to travel and meet me. He's in Vero Beach, and he was kind enough to travel and meet me and lend me his bagpipes that I played for the funeral around this time last year in Florida. And
so
he's doing
still
quite
playing.
well.
So he's
still he is playing. Yes, yep. Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've seen him in over 20 years. It's been
I haven't seen him in a while. I had talked to him, but now that he was in Florida a couple of years ago, we went out to lunch together, got caught up. He is the same character now that he was then. Trust me.
Hey, next time you talk to him, ask him if he remembers taking me to Glacken's.
Okay.
First time ever. And then that was when I worked like in the Central Bronx. I was on 183rd Street and Jerome Avenue back then. But then I ended up working on 150th Street, 150 Cortlandt and Morris, and Glacken's was right down the road. We used to drive by Glacken's every day. So it became a little bit more of a regular hangout years later. But Richie Finer was the first person to... That was a big... a lot of Yankee fans there at Glacken's. Even though it's south of Yankee Stadium, but it was definitely a big Yankee hangout. The South Bronx was a lot different, many years ago. With a lot of pubs and Irish pubs and everything. And that's one of my father's stories. He just talks about the number of pubs that used to be, because it was all Irish back then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, the St. Patrick's Day, for Pete's sakes, I remember my father would take us to a whole bunch of them, making it back to Parkchester. What
year was it that you started with the Fighting 69th?
1989. There was a piper for the 69th that was starting to make political statements, and the 69th didn't want any part of that. And it was General Flynn, who's another Iona guy who was a friend of my father's, became the adjutant general. And I went down early at some event. I believe it was a Macon dinner early in 1989. In fact, I'm sure it was a Macon dinner. And they were interested in filling that spot with somebody else. I had already been a member of the New York State Guard, so it was pretty good to keep it under the military umbrella. So General Flynn asked me if I would consider taking that spot kind of officially, and without hesitation, and I think without consulting my wife too, In fact, I'm almost positive of that. I can tell you why in a second now. I accepted it, and for that I got a T-shirt and went home and was on the back porch with my wife, saying that I was going to become the regimental piper of the 69th. And she's saying, how are you going to do this? Where are you going to do that? The time-wise, she was concerned about that. And into my driveway pulled Colonel Frank Riggio and Sergeant Major Mike Sheehan with a uniform for me and everything else. And they come by to say hello. I'm saying, "How? Look at this. I got the Colonel and the Sergeant Major coming to me. How bad could this possibly be?" You know? And she laughed. They came, they had a cup of coffee, and they were very grateful. They were on their way up to Fort Drum. And it started off that way. The first parade I led with them, it was exciting as could be. It was never any less exciting. It was just great every year. First parade I did with them was 1990. And through the years developed tremendous relationships with just fabulous people / soldiers, relationships I maintain now with these guys. You know, the colonel of the regiment changes every 2, possibly 3 years. Sometimes there's an option for a third year. So those guys change, but they were always grateful to have me there as kind of consistent. And by the way, the first year I marched, it wasn't quite leading. The pipe at that point in time was kind of several rows back. And I wasn't really satisfied with that. I wanted to be, you know, kind of being more of a showman, and spoke to my pal Liam Murphy, who did some history, you know, some studying. He's a historian. He did some looking into it for me, that the piper belongs with the colonel in the front. And then from the second year on, I was right in the front with the colonel, because that's where he should be.
How far back does that go? Like, how far back has the fight in 69 been leading the New York City St. Patrick's Day Parade?
Oh, it's 150 some odd years, 156 years, I think it was this year. They got involved when the Irish were being threatened. The parade was being threatened, and the 69th is the one that stepped up and protected the parade. So that's what they've done every year since, including right through COVID.
Wow. That's a great honor, Joe. That's a great honor.
Well, thank you. It is. I don't take it lightly. It's it is an honor, and I don't take it lightly, and I do what I can for them. Let me ask you. You're marching up Fifth Avenue, and you know, obviously we got all these high-rise buildings, and I know what it feels like to be piping up that avenue with with a big band. But you're coming up there by yourself. You got the fight in 69th behind you. What's going on in your mind? Like, are you thinking back at like what the history is behind that specific regiment? I mean, and I'm going to say this. It's because of that regiment that this country is what it is today. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Well, it's the most decorated regiment in the country, and they have traditions galore. And although it may not be full of Brady's, Martins, Grants, McLaughlins, that now it may be a lot of more Martinez and franchises, whatever, they all still have the tradition. It's great seeing some of these people in foreign nationalities singing Gary Owen and know the traditions. It's great. And what's going through my mind is these people have been waiting for waiting for the parade to start. A lot of them know what the 69th is all about. It's thrilling because they're cheering like crazy. The adrenaline flows. Typically until later on in years, probably until I was for the first 20, 25 years, I played that parade route nonstop all the way. Because if you stop playing, there's a big vacuum. That means you should play. And you say, is it difficult? Well, physically, I was in okay shape. I was able to do it. So I said, we'll worry about the pains later on. We'd only stop at the cathedral and the reviewing stand. Other than that, it was just basically nonstop, and I played the whole way.
You played no stopping. You just kept playing. I just kept
on going. Yeah, and right up to 86th Street.
Wow.
You know, and then we turn around. By the way, the morning starts at 6 o'clock with a toast to the fallen soldiers. Then we march from the armory to the cathedral. Then we have the mass, which the mass is for the soldiers of the 69th, and then we'd march down to 38th Street, turn around, then do the parade, and then have the regimental day back at the armory after the parade. March 17th. Years ago, was designated by the governor to be the day that the regiment would recognize and promote soldiers, and that was always just a wonderful celebrations back then.
I want to share a story. It was about a year or two after 9/11 that Chief Nigro, who was the chief of department at the time, he gave a speech at Squad 252, which was one of the houses that lost all their guys on 9/11. He gave a speech there, and I was there because we were playing the pipes there. And he compared the firemen going in on 9/11 to the fight in 69th. And he had this story that, man, it had everybody's ears. He talked specifically about the Battle of Antietam and how, had it not been for the Irish Regiment of the fight in 69th and how they reacted to take this specific bridge, that battle might have been, the North might have lost that particular battle, which was a major battle to win for the North because the South would have had a stronger hold, as I understand it, on Washington after that. But it was after that battle that they were in Fredericksburg, and I think it was General Lee is looking down the hill, and he says, "Oh, he sees the green flag, and he says, oh, here comes those fight in 69th again." And that's when the name, the fight in 69th, was coined. That's what I was told. Is that something you might have heard in circles?
Yeah, that's pretty much spot on from what I've gathered. Yeah, it was like oh no, here they come. He named them the Fighting 69th.
It's an incredible story. And then I don't know if you ever read. Did you ever read The Immortal Irishman?
I think I did many years ago. But
Timothy Egan is the author. It's about Thomas Francis Meagher.
Yes, Thomas. I thought so. Yeah.
What a great book.
Yeah, there's some real heroes associated with the regiment.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think it's a great honor that you did that for 33 years.
It was my honor. Trust me.
Now, what year was it that you actually started as the instructor for the FDNY Bagpipe Band?
I believe my first year was 1973. Could have been 1974. It was either my last year in high school, first year of college.
Wow, it was that early.
Yeah, I forget who I took over for because it was the same year I also started the drum section with the Kiltie Pipe Band. I would have taken, if I knew then where I am now, I would have taken better notes for a lot of this stuff. But yeah, it was just around that time I started the pipe band, and I have fabulous years with that. The FDNY Pipe Band is a unique, esprit de corps. They're full of spirit. Those guys. I'm looking for the word to say. Just a fabulous fraternity. I loved being there every Monday night for all those years. Yeah,
it's. I mean, I didn't come in until 1994, but I mean, you were there for all those years of the Gene Freyer and all the.
Oh yeah. Oh, I could have sold tickets for his shows. Oh yeah, the John stories. Cox. Forget about it. Yep. There are stories galore with the FDNY group. I mean, and I enjoyed for a good part of my being there. The pipe major was Bill Duffy, and we had a fabulous relationship. And I missed that guy. I was honored to be able to play after his funeral at St. Patrick's Cathedral. And working with the Tom McEnroe. I mean, I hate to mention names. I'm going to leave somebody out, but some of those guys. I mean, you just don't get better than the Crowleys and the Dugans and the Fitzpatricks. I mean, and they treated me fabulously. And I was there. I didn't want to leave, but all of a sudden I started getting the feeling that it's time to leave. And in 1995, I won an election here in the city of Peekskill to become a council person. And their meetings are Monday nights, so that meant I had to leave the pipe band. And if I didn't have something that forced me out, I could still be there, maybe. I don't know. But that was my last year of teaching. It was 1995.
At least I got 1 year with you there.
Yeah.
That was when we first met. But
and that's probably part of the reason why I suggested you go to Chalmers too, because I didn't know who was going to take over after me at that time. I don't know if they had anybody lined up.
Yeah. Well, and also they had just finished Bill Duffy was teaching the groups, and they just finished a group. Like that was when Liam Flaherty and Tommy Kneen and Joe Duggan, and there was a whole group of guys, and they just kind of finished, and I kind of came in late. So I went and got my own private instructor, but it worked out because I kind of got in at the same time anyway, because I learned pretty quickly. I bought my chanter in August, and I tried out for the band in January with my pipes, so that was pretty good.
So it is doable if you taught right, and you apparently have some talent too. You mentioned Liam Flaherty. Working with Liam was great with the band too. He used to come up here to Peekskill for his drum major lessons. And
well, I actually wrote that down as a note. I wanted to talk about that because Jimmy Corcoran passed away That
Another
was
wonderful
1995.
coach.
What a great
Yeah.
guy. I mean,
Yes.
he was the presence of the
He
fire
was. That's the
department.
right. Yeah, he certainly was.
You
Yep.
know, and then we had this thing where, all right, who's going to be the next guy? And I was a big proponent of having Liam. You know, there was a bunch of guys that were trying out to be the next drum major, but I was a big proponent of Liam. You know, number one, he's got the presence. At the time, he's probably the most Irish guy in the fire department. He was always at every engagement we had. You know, we used to have a point system, and if you ever looked at the sheet with all the points, he had the most points. So, you know, he was definitely an obvious guy. However, the thing that really made it different was he was going to you for lessons, and they actually did have a tryout. So when he went out there and he was marching with the stick and everything, I mean, it had to be unanimous. You know, he looked great. You know, and that was him going to you for lessons.
You know, just a little side note on that, Tim, is that you know where the lessons were. It was in the back room of Kelly's Bar down there on the riverfront, and word got out that I was teaching this good-looking fireman, single fireman, drum major lessons, and some of the young ladies in the area were all coming by trying to get a look in the window. Sometimes I turn around for counter march, and there was a few lassies out there eyeballing Liam. You know, so but he
a long time ago.
It's a long time ago, but I recall it like it's months ago.
Yeah.
He did, and it still continues to do a great job.
Yeah, he's the face of the band. You know. Well, that was one thing I said too. Is when Jimmy Corcoran passed away, he had been that face of the band for so many years, and I know we had a couple of old timers in the band that thought that they should be the next drum major, but. The way I looked at it, and I mean, I was a new guy in the band, but the way I looked at it was have a young guy take this position so that he can create that same exact long-term, you know, thing. Why have it be a transient type of position?
Yeah, I think you're right. I know the other guys that tried out, they were good, but the way you're assessing it, I would agree with too, because if any of the other guys got in there, it's not a job for an older fella, and they were already, you know, they were older than I was at the time.
Yeah, it was a unanimous thing. I wish I could talk about the tryout, but I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
I got you. I know where you're going with that. We'll talk about that one later too.
Oh God! Oh my God! So Joe, how about notable performances? Like, did you play with any? I don't know, any legendary bands. Like, I played one time with the Saw Doctors, you know, just hanging out. But did you play with any, like the Wolf Tones or anybody like that?
Yeah, I played with the Wolf Tones a couple of times. I played with the Chieftains. Several. I played with Andy Cooney. I toured with Andy Cooney. I played with a whole bunch of others. I played with the High Kings.
Oh, yeah. That must have been recent then.
Well, you want me to share the story with you quickly?
Yeah.
Because of through the 69th, I got to know General Martin Dempsey. General Martin Dempsey was a 4-star. He was an honorary member of the 69th, same position I held with the regiment. And I went down to play for Marty Dempsey's, when he became Chief of Staff of the Army. I went down to play when he became Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And then from out of nowhere, by the way, if you don't know Marty Dempsey, he's an Irish historian. He's a fabulous singer, besides being a fabulous person in general. And I was taken back when I was golfing. I mentioned Brian Marr before. I was golfing with his cousin Ken Marr when I got a text from Marty Dempsey asking me if I would consider playing the bagpipes at his retirement ceremony. And I was floored by that. You know, I really was. So again, without checking with my wife, because she had no choice in this one. There's certain people you don't say no to. I said, I'd be honored to go down to Washington to play for his retirement ceremony. He says, that's great. I'd like to play the Parting Glass, the High Kings version. So I says, fine. And it was kind of weird because this would have been 2015. It was 2015. And it was kind of weird because I said to Kenny, who between the two of us had 100+ years of piping experience, I had never been asked to play that before. Really? And I said, here, the first request is coming from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Holy cow. So anyway, fast forward, I did go down and wound up playing that. Marty Dempsey sang the Parting Glass. And as he walked off, I walked on and I played with the Marine Corps band and the Army band. They were all there in the chorus. It was by far, I think, the most fascinating performance for me. I was just taken back by it. It was quite the thing. You can Google it and easily see it. But having said that, I was then just that September, I happened to be judging a contest upstate New York where the High Kings are playing, and I was brought over to meet Finbar. Finbar didn't even say hello to me. He says, "You're Marty's buddy." I says, "Yeah." He says, "You got the pipes?" I says, "No, but I'll get a set." He says, "We're going to close out tomorrow night with the Parting Glass." I says, "Aces, we'll do that." And I did, and it worked out very well. And I played with them a whole bunch of times since, anytime they were in the area, which is a blast. I got to know the guys pretty well, and playing the Parting Glasses, to me, was very special. And I've had the honor to play. I did play with a lot of the other military bands. I had the honor of attending some of the military music bands in the Virginia area, and got to not only spend time with them, to play with them. And I play with the Commandant's Own every year at a performance at Camp Smith here. There's probably a few others, but I've been pretty darn lucky over the years to be exposed to them. Another one I played with, I was with her just Saturday night, Eileen Ivers, of course, and Jody Madden and Cherish the Ladies. So when you do this all these years,
my next guest next week.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, she's a live one. She'll be a lot easier to talk to than me, I'm sure. But I've done this. Well, I'm 70 now. I'll be 71 this year. So I've been doing this a lot of years, and I've had the opportunities to perform, be exposed to, join, and enjoy a lot of these groups and these people. Going to festivals.
I'm sitting here listening to you talk about it, and I'm thinking about some of the things that I've even, like, you forget some of these things that you actually played at. I mean, I actually played twice at Carnegie Hall, and I guess a lot of people would think that, wow, that's a great thing, and I'm like, I just remembered it.
Yeah, there you go. Sometimes my father played at Carnegie Hall. I have not. Do you recall when the FDNY band was on the Jay Leno Show? That was a thrill.
That was I was in the band then, but it was I wasn't I couldn't make it.
Okay, the band asked me to be the point guy, and I actually sat down at Jay Leno's desk, and for I don't know, half hour or so, and he was like so personable, trying to figure out what the band is going to do. But as he and I would discuss what the band was going to do, we kept getting the time of faxes. He was getting a fax from here and a fax from there about jokes. And he's asking me about this joke or that joke, and he would say it. And if I didn't laugh, he said, "That's no good." He'd throw it away. That was a thrill, Yeah, it was pretty funny, So after playing at the the Waldorf Astoria for so many years in the big hotels in the cities, you get exposed to a lot of these, and sometimes you just jam with them, which is always a lot of fun.
Have you ever heard of Il Divo? They were on the Regis and Kelly show, and they sing Amazing Grace. So I went on the show with them and played Amazing Grace for them.
Okay.
When Very they cool. sang. So that was a kind of cool. Again, I just remembered that.
There you go.
You honestly forget all these, the different.
I did a fair amount of playing with some Mexican bands. I traveled quite a bit down to Marfa, Texas, because Don Judd, who's kind of a world famous architect, was a fan of Pembroke, and certainly a fan of my father's, and became a fan of my Pembroke playing. And he would have us play. He owned a place down in Lower Manhattan, but he owned basically he was Marfa, Texas, and we'd have I'd go out there for a few days and then play Pembroke for his audiences there. It was pretty cool.
So were you a big Pembroke player?
I wouldn't say big. It wasn't. I was able to play. I learned what I needed to play so I could compete and win these Pipers of the Day awards.
Okay.
I could play and I did okay with it, but it was never something I was always thrilled with. I kind of joke. I'm a guy from the Bronx. I don't have the patience for Pembroke.
Yeah, it was different.
Pembroke takes some patience. And by the way, I mentioned before, James Kerr was not a big Pembroke player. He was great for the solo playing. Stuart Robertson was Pembroke. I learned a lot of Pembroke from Stuart Robertson and Donald Lindsay. So I played what I had. I probably played maybe 20 in my life. Yeah. I've enjoyed it, but I just never seemed to have the patience for it.
Scott Walker, wasn't he a big Pembroke guy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's a fellow competitive friend of mine for many years.
Now, you know what? Here's a good question I got. Like the Metro Cup, big things like that. Obviously, it's the best pipers in the world coming around to compete in these things, but
it
was right. But
Eric,
there's got to be a judge. So, were you ever a judge at Metro
No,
Cup?
I played the Metro Cup a few times. I never had the opportunity to judge it, and one of the reasons I used to conflict them with some of my trips to Texas. But I never judged the Metro Cup, but I did play in it, and I'm hoping that they can get it back here. But Eric Stein, God bless him, he's does so much piping. He was and he's done now with the Metro Cup down there, and it's fabulous. Ann and I have gone down there every year he's had it so far down in Orlando.
Is that the Sun Belt that he calls
it? Yes,
the
Sun Belt, exactly. And you got 10 to 12, if not a couple more, maybe 14 of the best pipers around the world. So we've been down there enjoying that. Yeah. That's become the southern Metro Cup, if you would.
Right. That was always fun going to watch the Metro Cup.
Oh, it was a fabulous thing for bagpiping. Yeah, great contest.
I remember going. I was younger, and I remember seeing. I think his name was Stuart Little. I guess newer bagpipers now would definitely know who he is, but he was young then, and it was unbelievable watching this.
Yeah, he still is unbelievable. Trust me, he's still unbelievable. Yeah. And then some of the other ones, I became pretty close friends with Alan Tully. The Tully family has always been in Orlando. My kids and his kids enjoy each other's company down. I've golfed with them a few times. Those piping contests they're great.
Terry Tully, right?
That's Alan's father.
That's the father?
Yes.
Okay.
So the grandfather started the pipe band.
Okay. He's the one that wrote the song for Eric Stein, I think, right? Wasn't it Terry Tully wrote that song?
I believe it was Terry. Yeah, he was pipe major of St. Lawrence O'Toole until Alan took over, I think 15 years or so ago. I may be off a little bit.
The solo competition thing I did a little bit with John Chalmers, back then, but I kind of got away from it. Just so involved with the fire department and the amount of functions that we were doing. It kind of.
No,
and especially now. You have any idea how much stuff the band is doing now?
I've seen it. It's nuts. I can't imagine any band being busy. How you guys split it all up and everything.
I mean, they split up, but I think they're handling anywhere around 450 engagements a year. Think about that. It's more than one a day.
I'm not surprised. It's shocking, but knowing what they do, I'm not surprised. I mean, you've got numbers. I don't know how it's managed. Apparently, it's managed just fine. Somebody's got to be delegating who's doing what, but it's pretty impressive. You guys have a fabulous reputation that's well deserved.
Well, the guys, thank God for the new guys, and the old. There's plenty of retired guys that are still.
Yeah, no, I know,
very active.
And I would say also, I admired from a distance after 9/11 what you guys did. It was just a phenomenal accomplishment. But I got to tell you, I remember seeing guys that were doing that. I maybe not see them in 2, 3, 4 months, and they aged. You could tell how it was getting to them. These guys, you guys doing 4 or 5 funerals a day, days on end, and the devotion is something truly to be admired.
Yeah, it was. Those were tough times.
Yeah.
Let's go on to one other thing here, Joe. I do want to talk about Hunter Mountain Celtic Festival. How that started, what your involvement was, because I know you had a big involvement with that.
Hunter Mountain is owned by Orville Slutsky, and Slutsky wanted a whole bunch of bagpipers. It's marching down the hill. And this is really kind of before my time as John Allen, who was chairman of the local USPBA branch, met with him and suggested the only way you're going to get all these people to march down the hill is have a pipe band contest. That's the way you attract them to the mountain for the contest, and that culminates in the mass bands. So that started, I even forget what year it was, Tim, and John was the chairman for a little bit, and the contest grew and grew. And that back then, it was the festival itself was 4 days, although the bagpiping was really some Saturday, mostly all Sunday, because the festival was supposed to conclude with the bands coming down the hill. Jerry Stack took over as chairman. Then when Jerry passed it along to me, I even forget what year that was, but I guess it's over 6-7 years now, and I agreed to run it as long as I could use the same people I used to run the Peekskill events. And I guess I ran it with that group for about 15 years. And Orville was great to work with. He was super, and the staff up there was tremendous. They gave me everything I asked for. They would not make changes unless they conferred with me. And that contest grew. I mean, you probably know that the location of the actual contest moved around the grounds, but always consulted me. Sometimes it seemed like the pipe bands were getting pushed around a little bit because they were bringing different acts. But that mass band is so talked about. And when it was still, we'd have 40 bands up there, and you get all those guys at the top of the hill. You could have sold tickets, or somebody should have videotaped it, because it was a mad scene up there. And somehow we put it together. And again, for me being a senior drum major, coming over that cliff and seeing thousands and thousands of people. I mean, they started coming in. There was a miles long wait coming in, starting at 3:00 on Sunday for the 6:30 mass bands coming down that hill. And it was just phenomenal. And people still talk about it. Everybody misses that contest.
Yeah, I missed that. I remember going there when I was a little kid, and then when I got in the band, now we're competing at Hunter, and we're participating in the mass bands, walking down the hill, slipping down the hill.
Yeah. But and I joked, one of the reasons why I said I wouldn't do it unless I'm out front. I'm by myself, so I'm not going to get hurt. What happens back there, I don't know. But it's a wonderful thing, and I run into Manhattan a lot, and especially if I'm wearing my kilt, you might go into a pub and somebody will say, "Hey, did you ever see those bands that march down the hill at Hunter Mountain?" And I can honestly say, no, I have never seen it. I mean, I've seen it on TV, but I've never seen it live. And I would let them go on, and I would joke that this is the first face you see coming over that hill.
Yeah.
So it was great. But then Orville passed away, and the mountain was sold. And the people that took over the mountain was a private. Actually, I think it was a public company. It was Peak. It was a skiing company, Peak Construction, I think, Peak something entertainment. They looked at the money and everything else, and basically they got rid of all the festivals one by one. I think they still do the German Fest for a couple of days anyway, but they were not interested in doing what we had been doing.
It's a shame. It really is a shame. That was one of my favorite weekends of the whole year.
Yeah. Well,
so much fun.
I got to tell you, when I told my kids there was no more Hunter Mountain, they cried, because that's where they spent every third weekend of August. Basically all their lives.
Which was always the same weekend as the Worlds.
Well, the Worlds is always the third Saturday. We conflicted every year, except for maybe once every 6 or 7 years where they would be different, just because of a weird the just because of the calendar. The Worlds we were always the third Sunday. The Worlds was always the third Saturday, or the Saturday after the third Monday, or something like that. But it did conflict with the Worlds. I
have great stories that came that rent a house for like 3 or 4 nights.
Oh yeah, no, and they had some great entertainment up there. I enjoyed playing up there, especially with the groups like McTallamore. We did have the Wolf Toners there, but you know who the first act was up there? I remember people. It's a trivia question, but Donald Sutherland was the first act that Hunter Mountain had for the Celtic Festival. Was Donald Sutherland, believe it or not.
That's a great trivia question.
Yeah.
I would never get that.
No, nobody does.
No, I remember seeing the Prodigals there. I guess Shillelagh Law probably played there too.
I'm sure they did. Tannehill Weavers did.
Tannehill Weavers, yeah. I remember seeing them.
McTallamore. Over the years, probably a few bands have not played there.
Yeah, Joe. So, Joe, is there anything else you'd like to add, or any?
No, you know what? At 70 years old, I look back and say I've been pretty damn lucky. The bagpiping has opened a lot of doors for me, and I think I'm grateful for the opportunities that I've had and took advantage of. Met a lot of people. I still enjoy. Okay, so I stopped leading the parade in New York City because it just became too physically demanding. But more importantly, I had a person by the name of Sean Gow, a fellow Iona guy that was already helping me out with the regiment takeover, and he's doing a fabulous job. So that's the only thing I'm not doing. I still enjoy going to the local schools to play around St. Patrick's Day, which we've done for years. And I'm still playing some real nice events, meeting people like you, having relationships with all the bands, all these people. We're a tight fraternity, and what's good is that very few of us in our groups play bagpipes exclusively. They all do something else, and you can always pick up something else and do something, and I've been very lucky not only to be, maybe with Hunter Mountain, they associate it with Joe Brady, but I'm not stupid enough to know that it's not just Joe Brady. It's all the people that I've been able to count on over the years, not only Hunter Mountain, a lot of other things I've been involved with. So in that respect, I'm grateful and I'm lucky. It's been a great time.
It is all about relationships, and we've been very fortunate to, accumulate a lot of great friends over the years. And I'll say this: every Christmas time we have the FDNY band has our Christmas mass, and all the years that even after you were not our instructor anymore, you would still come to our mass, and it was always great to see your face there. So you're always welcome.
That, Tim.
And you're
I
always
enjoy
welcome.
getting that call from Jim Ginty, and then whoever followed in his shoes. The name will come to me after we finish talking.
Brian
and I've always enjoyed the red carpet that's been rolled out for us, especially with you guys. It's always, always great to see all you guys. And even now with the new guys, they don't know who I am, but somebody put something in their ear that all of a sudden they're treating me royally as well. So. I like to spend more time with the new guys too. Even with the new guys I saw at Iona the other night, it was kind of fun. I never thought I was going to be in the position I'm in as a senior citizen, but here we are. I'm going to make the most of it. I'm going to enjoy it as much as I can.
Yeah. Well, my buddy always said, "We're not here for a long time, just a good time."
There you go. I'm not going to
And
argue
he's
that.
no
And you're
longer
never young.
with us, but we're gonna keep going.
There you go. And you're never younger than you are today. Remember that.
Yeah, that's right. Joe, it was great to have you on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And again,
Thank you for
remember,
asking.
you're always welcome. You're always welcome at our any events we have, our mass and all that. So great having you on the show, and we'll definitely catch up again soon.
You're great, Tim. Thanks for being here.